The gentle hum of the vacuum cleaner wasn't enough to drown out my thoughts as I moved methodically through the hallway of the Diamond Elite Hotel. My shoulders ached from hours of pushing and pulling the heavy machine across plush carpets, making them pristine again for guests who would barely notice. 6 hours into my 10-hour shift, and I was running on nothing but lukewarm coffee and desperation. "Sophia, room 712 needs immediate attention. VIP guest," crackled Mrs. Reynolds' voice through my walkie-talkie, the static making her sound even more irritated than usual. I sighed, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. "On my way," I responded, knowing that arguing would only make things worse. I needed this job, needed it desperately enough to swallow whatever pride I had left after 6 months of scrubbing toilets and changing sheets for people who couldn't even remember my name. The 7th floor housed the luxury suites, a world I only entered with a cleaning cart and a uniform that itched at the collar. I pushed my cart toward room 712, fumbling with my master keycard while balancing a stack of fresh towels against my hip. The corridor smelled of expensive cologne and polished wood, so different from the bleach and disinfectant scents that clung to my uniform and followed me home each night. I knocked 3 times, my knuckles rapping against the mahogany door. "Housekeeping," I called out, waiting for the customary silence that meant I could enter. When no response came, I slid the keycard into the slot, watching the light turn green before pushing the door open. The suite was dark, heavy curtains drawn against the afternoon sun, casting the room in shadows that seemed to breathe. Something felt different. The air was thick with tension, like the moment before lightning strikes. I should have noticed the subtle signs. The half-empty whiskey glass on the marble countertop, the laptop open on the dining table, the suit jacket draped over a chair, but exhaustion had dulled my senses. And I wheeled my cart into the suite, flicking on the lights without thinking. That's when I heard it. A sharp intake of breath from the adjoining room, followed by a low murmur of voices that immediately fell silent. My heart leaped into my throat as a man emerged from the bedroom doorway, his silhouette cutting a dark line against the dim lighting behind him. Tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, he moved with the quiet confidence of someone who owned not just the room, but the entire building, perhaps the entire street. I'm so sorry, sir," I stammered, already backing toward the door, my hands trembling as they gripped the handle of my cart. I didn't realize the room was occupied. His face remained partially in shadow, but I could feel his eyes, dark, assessing, moving over me, taking in my uniform, my face, the tremor in my hands. The silence stretched between us until I thought I might scream just to break it. Then he spoke. His voice surprisingly soft, with an accent I couldn't quite place. Eastern European, maybe, smooth around the edges but with a hardness underneath, like velvet over steel. "Enter and close the door," he said. The words not a request, but a command. My survival instinct screamed at me to run, to push my cart into the hallway and slam the door behind me. But something in his voice froze me in place. A quiet authority that made disobedience seem impossible. I hesitated. One foot still pointed toward the exit. "Sir, I can come back later. Now." The word hung in the air between us, its single syllable somehow filling the entire room. With shaking hands, I pulled my cart fully into the suite and closed the door behind me, the soft click of the latch sounding like a prison cell locking. The man, still half in shadow, nodded once, then turned and walked toward the panoramic windows, drawing back the curtains to reveal the sprawling city below, glittering in the afternoon sun. "Your name," he said, his back to me, hands clasped behind him as he gazed out at the skyline. "Sophia," I answered, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "Sophia Reyes." He turned then, and I saw his face clearly for the first time. Handsome wasn't the right word. His features were too sharp, too severe for mere handsomeness. Strong jaw, straight nose, eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it was his mouth that caught my attention. Full lips pressed into a thin line that suggested he rarely smiled, and when he did, it might be terrifying to witness. "Sophia," he repeated, as if testing how my name felt on his tongue. Do you know who I am? I shook my head, even as my mind raced through possibilities. The way the hotel staff had been on edge all morning, the extra security in the lobby, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the break room, it all suddenly made sense. My name is Alexander Volkov. He said it as if I should recognize it, as if the name itself carried weight. When I showed no reaction, something like amusement flickered across his face. You truly don't know, do you? Before I could respond, the bathroom door opened, and another man emerged, shorter, bulkier, with a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He took one look at me and reached inside his jacket, his movement fluid and practiced. Mikhail, Volkov said quietly, raising a hand. It's fine. Ms. Reyes was just leaving. The man, Mikhail, withdrew his empty hand but kept his eyes on me, unblinking, assessing. I felt the blood drain from my face as realization dawned. The subtle bulge under his jacket wasn't a cell phone. I should go, I whispered, already backing toward my cart. Not yet. Volkov moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, like cedar and smoke. You interrupted something important, Sophia. And now I find myself curious, my heart hammered against my ribs. About what, sir? About you. He circled me slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. About why you're working as a maid in a luxury hotel when your hands suggest you're educated. Piano lessons, perhaps? I swallowed hard, unsure how he had noticed the calluses on my fingertips from years of playing. I need the money, I said simply, honesty spilling out before I could stop it. My father's medical bills, he said, as if I'd confirmed something he already suspected. Family, the most powerful motivator. He stopped in front of me again, close enough that I had to tilt my head up to meet his gaze. What would you do for your family, Sophia Reyes? The question hung between us, loaded with implications I didn't want to consider. Before I could answer, a phone rang. Not the standard ringtone, but a classical piece I vaguely recognized. Volkov extracted a sleek black phone from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and answered in a language I didn't understand, his voice dropping to a low murmur. While he spoke, Mikhail moved to stand by the door, effectively blocking my exit. I stood frozen, clutching my cart handle like a lifeline, my mind racing through scenarios, each one worse than the last. Whatever I had walked into was dangerous. I could feel it in the air, in the way these men moved, in the careful way Volkov chose his words, even in a language I couldn't understand. When he ended the call, Volkov turned back to me, his expression unreadable. It seems we have a problem, he said, sliding the phone back into his pocket. You've seen something you shouldn't have. I blinked, confused. I haven't seen anything. The laptop, he interrupted, gesturing to the open computer on the dining table. The papers beside it. The men who were here before you entered. Only then did I notice the leather briefcase on the floor beside the table, papers spread out, some with what looked like blueprints or floor plans. My stomach dropped as I realized what this might mean. I didn't look at anything, I said quickly, panic rising in my throat. I swear, I just came in to clean. I believe you, Volkov said, surprising me, but belief isn't the issue here. Security is. He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. You have a choice to make, Sophia Reyes. A simple one, really. Mikhail shifted his weight, the floorboard creaking beneath him, and I flinched at the sound. Work for me, Volkov said, the offer hanging in the air between us like smoke. Exclusively. Double whatever this hotel pays you, plus expenses. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. Work. For you? Doing what? His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Exactly what you're doing now. Cleaning, maintaining my private residences. The difference is you'll work only for me, and you'll be well compensated for your discretion. The implication was clear. Take the job or face consequences I didn't want to imagine. This wasn't a job offer. It was a beautifully wrapped threat. I have responsibilities here. A contract. That will be handled, he said dismissively, as if contracts could be dissolved with a wave of his hand. Perhaps for him, they could be. A knock at the door made me jump. Mikhail opened it a crack, exchanged a few words with someone in the hallway, then closed it again, nodding to Volkov. Your manager is looking for you, Volkov said, amusement coloring his tone. Apparently you've been missing for 15 minutes. Poker. Had it only been 15 minutes? It felt like hours had passed in this darkened suite. Hours spent balancing on a knife's edge between safety and something I couldn't quite name. Think about my offer, Volkov said, moving toward the door. Mikhail will escort you downstairs to explain your absence. He reached into his pocket, extracted a business card, and held it out to me. Call this number with your answer by tomorrow morning. I took the card automatically, my fingers brushing against his. His skin was warm, the contact sending an unexpected shiver down my spine. Fear, I told myself. Just fear. And Sophia, he added, his voice dropping to a near whisper, choose wisely. As Mikhail led me from the room, I clutched the business card in my palm, the embossed lettering pressing into my skin like a brand. I had entered that suite as Sophia Reyes, maid at the Diamond Elite Hotel. I was leaving as something else entirely. A woman with a dangerous secret, and a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Outside the door, I took one last glance back. Alexander Volkov stood by the window again, his silhouette dark against the cityscape behind him. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I saw something in his gaze that made my breath catch, a hunger that had nothing to do with power or business, and everything to do with me. The door closed between us, but I knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning. The walk to the service elevator felt like a death march, with Mikhail's hulking presence just inches behind me. His breathing was steady and controlled, a stark contrast to my own shallow gasps. My cleaning cart had been abandoned in Volkov's suite. Another problem to explain later. Ms. Reynolds looking for you, Mikhail said as we stepped into the elevator, his English choppy but understandable. It was the first time he'd spoken directly to me, and his voice was surprisingly gentle, despite his intimidating appearance. I nodded, unable to form words around the lump in my throat. The business card burned in my pocket, a physical reminder of the encounter I'd just survived, if survival was the right word for it. The elevator doors closed, sealing us in the small space together, and I pressed myself against the metal wall, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. Mr. Volkov is good employer, Mikhail said suddenly, his eyes fixed on the descending floor numbers. Better than hotel. I glanced at him, trying to read his scarred face. Was this a threat or genuine advice? I have bills to pay, I said finally. I can't afford to make enemies. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. This why you should say yes. Mr. Volkov takes care of his people. The elevator reached the ground floor, the doors sliding open to reveal the bustling staff area. Mrs. Reynolds stood there, arms crossed over her chest, foot tapping an impatient rhythm against the polished floor. Sophia Reyes, where on earth have you? Her words died in her throat as she noticed Mikhail stepping out behind me. Her eyes widened, flicking between us nervously. Mikhail handed her a folded note. From Mr. Volkov, Sophia help with special request, not her fault. Mrs. Reynolds unfolded the note, her expression shifting from anger to something close to fear as she read. I see, she said, her voice suddenly deferential. That's perfectly fine then. Thank you for escorting her down. Mikhail nodded once, then turned to me. Remember, tomorrow morning. With that, he walked away, his broad shoulders parting the crowd of hotel staff who had gathered to witness my presumed downfall. Well, Mrs. Reynolds said, tucking the note into her pocket, it seems you've caught Mr. Volkov's attention. There was a question in her eyes, but she didn't voice it. I was just cleaning, I said weakly. He needed something. She raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Your cart is still upstairs. Go retrieve it and finish your shift. Room 7112 is now marked as Do Not Disturb. I nodded, relieved to escape further questioning. As I turned to go, Mrs. Reynolds caught my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. Be careful, Sophia, she whispered. Mr. Volkov isn't just any guest. Who is he? I asked, seizing the opportunity to understand what I'd walked into. She released my arm, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. Someone you don't want to owe anything to, she said simply, then walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a metronome counting down seconds I suddenly felt I didn't have. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I retrieved my cart from outside Volkov's suite. Someone had moved it into the hallway, and went through the motions of cleaning rooms, changing sheets, and restocking amenities. But my mind remained in that darkened suite, replaying every second of my encounter with Alexander Volkov. By the time I clocked out at 9 p.m., exhaustion had settled deep in my bones. I changed out of my uniform in the staff locker room, pulling on worn jeans and a faded sweater that had once belonged to my mother. The contrast between my world and Volkov's couldn't have been more stark. The night air was cold against my face as I stepped outside, pulling my thin jacket tighter around my shoulders. The bus stop was 3 blocks away, and I walked quickly, keeping my head down and my hand wrapped around the pepper spray in my pocket, a habit formed after too many late-night shifts in a city that never truly slept. A black SUV with tinted windows idled at the curb near the employee exit. I quickened my pace, a tendril of fear curling in my stomach. The passenger window slid down smoothly as I passed. "Ms. Reyes," called a voice I didn't recognize. "Mr. Volkov sent me to drive you home." I stopped, turning slowly to face the vehicle. The driver was younger than I expected, with close-cropped hair and eyes that remained hidden behind dark sunglasses despite the late hour. "That's not necessary," I said, taking a step back. "I take the bus." "It's nearly 10 miles to your apartment," he replied, and the casual mention of where I lived sent ice through my veins. "The last bus leaves in 7 minutes. You won't make it." He was right, and we both knew it. If I missed that bus, it would mean an expensive taxi ride I couldn't afford, or a long walk through neighborhoods that became increasingly dangerous after dark. "How do you know where I live?" I asked. Though I already suspected the answer, the driver's expression remained impassive. "Mr. Volkov likes to know who he's dealing with." Of course he did. In the few hours since our encounter, he had learned not just my address, but apparently my entire transportation schedule. The message was clear. There was nowhere I could go that he couldn't find me. Against my better judgment, I slid into the back seat of the SUV, the leather cool and smooth beneath my thighs. The vehicle pulled away from the curb immediately, merging into the late-night traffic with practiced ease. "Does Mr. Volkov send cars for all his potential employees?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The driver's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "Only the important ones." I turned to look out the window, watching as we passed through downtown, the glittering high-rises giving way to increasingly modest neighborhoods. We drove in silence after that, the only sound the soft classical music playing through the car's expensive sound system. 20 minutes later, we pulled up outside my apartment building. A once grand structure now showing its age in peeling paint and cracked concrete steps. I reached for the door handle, then paused. "Tell Mr. Volkov I'm still considering his offer," I said, surprised by my own boldness. The driver nodded once. "He'll be expecting your call tomorrow." I stepped out of the car, the cool night air a relief after the SUV's stifling interior. The vehicle remained at the curb, engine running, as I climbed the steps to the building's entrance. Only after I'd unlocked the door and stepped inside did I hear it pull away. My apartment was dark and silent, a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. I flipped on the lights, revealing the small living room with its secondhand furniture and the kitchenette with dishes still piled in the sink from breakfast. Home, though it hardly felt like it sometimes. I dropped my keys on the counter and pulled Volkov's business card from my pocket, staring at the embossed black lettering, Alexander Volkov, followed by a phone number. No company name, no title, no address. Just a name and a way to reach him. As if that was all that mattered in the world. My phone buzzed with an incoming text making me jump. It was from my father. "How was work today, mija? Don't forget your old man has his appointment tomorrow at 2. Love you." Reality came crashing back. My father's medical bills, the mounting debt, the second job I'd taken at a cafe on weekends just to make ends meet. And now, an offer that could solve everything, or destroy what little stability I had left. I texted back. "Work was fine. I'll pick you up at 1:30. Love you too." Setting my phone down, I moved to the window, pulling back the curtain to peer at the street below. The black SUV was gone. but a sleek sedan had taken its place. A man sitting behind the wheel, his face illuminated by the glow of a cell phone, watching me, waiting for my decision. I let the curtain fall back into place and sank onto the edge of my bed, burying my face in my hands. What choice did I really have? Volkov had made it clear that refusing wasn't an option, not if I wanted to keep my life as it was. And yet, accepting meant stepping into a world I knew nothing about, working for a man whose very presence radiated danger. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind racing through possibilities, each scenario worse than the last. By the time dawn broke, painting my small room in shades of gray and gold, I had made my decision. I showered, dressed in my most professional outfit, a navy pencil skirt and white blouse I kept for interviews, and made coffee with hands that trembled slightly. The business card lay on my kitchen counter, the phone number memorized after hours of staring at it. At exactly 7 a.m., I picked up my phone and dialed. He answered on the second ring, his voice just as I remembered, smooth, accented, commanding. "Sophia, I've been waiting for your call." I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders as if he could see me. "I accept your offer, Mr. Volkov, but I have conditions." A pause, then a low chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. "Conditions? You surprise me, Ms. Reyes. I need to keep my current schedule 3 days a week," I said, forcing confidence into my voice. "My father has medical appointments I can't miss, and I want everything in writing: salary, expectations, benefits." Another pause, longer this time. I held my breath, wondering if I'd pushed too far. "Your loyalty to your father is commendable," he said finally. 4 days a week you work exclusively for me. The other 3 you're free to attend to your family obligations. As for the contract, Mikhail will deliver it today. Is that acceptable? I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. "Yes." "Good. A car will pick you up tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Pack enough for a week away." My eyes flew open. "A week? But you said—" "I said you could keep your schedule 3 days a week. I didn't specify which days." His tone was final, brooking no argument. "The first week is training, at my estate upstate. Your father's appointments will be rescheduled." "How can you possibly—" "It's been handled, Sophia. Dr. Kessler has agreed to see your father next week instead. His calendar has been adjusted." The mention of my father's specialist, a doctor whose waiting list stretched months, rendered me speechless. In the space of a day, Volkov had not only learned where I lived, but had managed to rearrange my father's medical care. "Why me?" I asked, the question that had burned in my mind since yesterday finally spilling out. "Why go to all this trouble for a maid?" Silence stretched across the line, so complete that I wondered if he'd hung up. Then his voice returned, lower, almost intimate. "Let's just say you caught my attention, Sophia. Not many people do." Before I could press further, he continued. "Mikhail will deliver the contract by noon. Review it carefully. I'll see you tomorrow." The line went dead, leaving me standing in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, heart racing with a mixture of fear and something else I didn't want to name. True to his word, Mikhail appeared at my door at exactly noon, a sleek leather portfolio tucked under his arm. I'd spent the morning pacing my apartment, alternating between second-guessing my decision and trying to explain to my father why I'd suddenly taken a new job. "It pays better, Papa," I'd told him over the phone, "and they're offering benefits, health insurance that would cover more of your treatments." "What kind of job changes so quickly?" he'd asked, suspicion coloring his voice. My father might be ill, but his mind remained sharp. "Yesterday you were cleaning hotel rooms." "It's a private position," I said, the half-truth bitter on my tongue. "For a wealthy client who stayed at the hotel. He needs a household manager." The lie came easily, disturbingly so. When Mikhail knocked, I jumped, nearly dropping the mug of cold coffee I'd been clutching for the past hour. I opened the door to find him filling the frame, his scarred face impassive as ever. "Contract," he said simply, holding out the portfolio. I took it, surprised by its weight. "Thank you." He didn't leave, just stood there expectantly. I realized he was waiting to take the signed contract back with him. "I need time to read it," I said, clutching the portfolio to my chest. "Mr. Volkov say you smart woman. Read fast." A hint of a smile touched his lips, gone so quickly I might have imagined it. I hesitated, then stepped back. "Would you like to come in? This might take a while." Mikhail entered my small apartment, his bulk making the space seem even smaller. He glanced around, taking in the worn furniture, the family photos on the wall, the medical bills stacked neatly on the coffee table. His expression gave nothing away, but I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if he was cataloging every detail of my life to report back to his employer. "Coffee?" I offered, desperate to break the awkward silence. He nodded, and I busied myself in the kitchenette, grateful for the distraction. When I returned with a steaming mug, Mikhail had settled onto my sofa, looking incongruously large against the faded cushions. "Thank you," he said, accepting the coffee with surprisingly gentle hands. I noticed a tattoo peeking from beneath his cuff, intricate lines disappearing up his wrist. I sat across from him and opened the portfolio. Inside was a contract, professionally drawn up, outlining the terms of my employment with Alexander Volkov personally. Not a company or organization, just him. The salary made me gasp, 3 times what I currently made, plus housing, transportation, and comprehensive health insurance that would cover not just me but my father as well. My eyes caught on a clause midway through the document. Employee agrees to absolute discretion regarding all matters related to employer's business, personal affairs, associates and activities, during and after the term of employment. Breach of confidentiality will result in immediate termination and legal consequences. Legal consequences. The words seemed to pulse on the page, their meaning clear despite the formal language. I flipped through the remaining pages, noting clauses about international travel, flexible hours, and a non-disclosure agreement that spanned 5 pages alone. Whatever Volkov was involved in, he was serious about keeping it private. "This is comprehensive," I said finally, looking up to find Mikhail watching me intently. "Mr. Volkov protect his interests," he replied with a shrug. "And his people." "And which am I?" I asked. "An interest or one of his people?" Mikhail's expression softened slightly. "Depends on you." I took a deep breath and signed the contract, my signature looking small and insignificant next to the dense legal text. As I handed the portfolio back to Mikhail, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just signed away more than my time. He tucked the portfolio under his arm and stood. "Car comes at 8 tomorrow. Pack light but nice. Mr. Volkov has good guests." "What does that mean?" I asked, following him to the door. Mikhail paused, hand on the doorknob. "Means you not just cleaning anymore." He studied me for a moment, then added, "Be careful, Sophia Reyes. Mr. Volkov sees something in you. Is good, but dangerous too." With that cryptic warning he left, the door closing behind him with a finality that echoed in my chest. I spent the rest of the day in a state of anxious anticipation, packing and repacking a small suitcase with the nicest clothes I owned, pitifully inadequate for whatever awaited me at Volkov's estate. I called my father again, assuring him that everything was fine, that this was a good opportunity, that I would call him every day while I was away. "I don't like this, Sophia," he said, his voice weak over the phone. "Sudden jobs with strange rich men. It sounds like trouble." "It's just housekeeping, Papa," I lied. "Just for a better salary. Promise me you'll be careful," he insisted. "Your mother would never forgive me if I let anything happen to you." The mention of my mother, gone 3 years now, after a brief, brutal battle with cancer, sent a pang through my heart. "I promise," I whispered. That night, I barely slept, my dreams filled with dark hotel suites and shadowy figures. I woke at dawn, exhausted but too wired to go back to sleep. I showered, dressed in my most professional outfit again, this time paired with practical shoes I could work in, and waited, my packed bag by the door. At exactly 8 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text, downstairs. The same black SUV from 2 nights ago idled at the curb, the same driver at the wheel. He took my bag without a word, placing it in the trunk while I slid into the back seat. This time, I wasn't alone. Alexander Volkov sat on the opposite side, his dark suit impeccable, his attention focused on the tablet in his hands. He didn't look up as I entered, just said, "Good morning, Sophia," as if this was a normal commute, a normal job, a normal life. "Good morning, Mr. Volkov," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked up then, his dark eyes assessing me in a single sweep. "You'll find appropriate attire at the estate," he said, apparently finding my outfit lacking. "Daniel will have your measurements." I bristled at the presumption. "My clothes are fine for housekeeping." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Is that what you think you'll be doing? Simply housekeeping?" The question hung between us as the car pulled away from the curb, merging into the morning traffic. I gripped the edge of the seat, suddenly unsure of what exactly I had agreed to. "Your contract specified household management," he continued, setting his tablet aside. "That includes overseeing staff, coordinating events, and occasionally acting as hostess when I entertain. Hardly just housekeeping. Hostess." The word sent a chill down my spine. "I didn't read the fine print? I thought you might be more careful, Sophia." He leaned forward slightly, his cologne, that same subtle scent of cedar and smoke, enveloping me. "Don't worry. Your virtue is not part of our agreement. Your intelligence, your discretion, and your apparent ability to adapt quickly. Those are what interest me." I swallowed hard, heat rising to my cheeks at the implication. "Why me?" I asked again, the question that had haunted me since our first meeting. "You could hire anyone with actual experience for this role." Volkov studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his jacket and withdrew a photograph, handing it to me without a word. It was a picture of me, much younger, perhaps 18 or 19, seated at a piano on a stage, my face alight with passion, as my fingers pressed the keys. My last recital before my mother's diagnosis, before college plans were abandoned for hospital rooms and mounting bills. "How did you get this?" I whispered, staring at the ghost of who I once was. "I make it my business to know people," he said simply. "You had a scholarship to Juilliard. Full ride. You declined it to care for your mother and later your father." I looked up, meeting his gaze. "You investigated me. Thoroughly." He took the photo back, tucking it into his jacket. "You sacrifice everything for family, Sophia. That kind of loyalty is rare and valuable." The car had left the city behind, tall buildings giving way to suburbs and then to rolling countryside. We traveled in silence after that, the implications of his words settling over me like a weight. He hadn't chosen me randomly. He had selected me specifically, researched my past, my family, my abandoned dreams. The realization was both terrifying and, in some strange way, flattering. Hours later, the SUV turned off the main highway onto a private road, winding through dense forest before emerging at a massive iron gate. A security guard stepped forward, nodded at the driver, and the gate swung open silently. The estate that came into view stole my breath. Estate was too modest a term for what was essentially a modern castle, a sprawling stone mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the midday sun, surrounded by manicured gardens, and what looked like several smaller guest houses scattered across the vast property. "Welcome to Volkov Estate," Alexander said, watching my reaction with those dark, assessing eyes. "You're home for the next week, and 3 days a week after that." The SUV pulled up to the main entrance, where a line of staff stood waiting. A butler, several maids, a chef in whites, and a severe-looking woman in a crisp pantsuit. "Mrs. Petrov runs the household," Volkov explained as the driver opened my door. "You'll work directly under her until you learn the routines. After that, you'll report only to me." I stepped out of the car on shaky legs, overwhelmed by the grandeur before me and the impossible task ahead. Playing hostess for a man like Volkov? Overseeing a staff that clearly had more experience than I did? It was madness. As if reading my thoughts, Volkov placed a hand on the small of my back, guiding me forward. "You'll adapt, Sophia," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "People like us always do. People like us." As if we had anything in common beyond the accident of our meeting. "Mrs. Petrov stepped forward, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, her expression making it clear she found me lacking. Ms. Reyes, she said with a slight accent similar to Volkov's. We've been expecting you. Behind her, the staff regarded me with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. I stood straighter, determined not to show fear, even as my heart raced with uncertainty. Mr. Volkov has guests arriving at 7, Mrs. Petrov continued. You'll observe tonight, assist tomorrow. Come, I'll show you to your quarters. My quarters turned out to be a suite larger than my entire apartment, with a bedroom, sitting area, and private bathroom complete with a marble-soaking tub. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a secluded garden, autumn leaves creating a tapestry of red and gold against the emerald lawn. This is too much, I said as Mrs. Petrov showed me around. She gave me a look that suggested I was already testing her patience. Mr. Volkov insists his senior staff be accommodated properly. Your wardrobe is here. She opened double doors to reveal a walk-in closet already filled with clothing. Dresses, blouses, slacks, all in my size, the tag still attached. Daniel will see you at 3 for final fittings. I don't understand, I said, fingering the sleeve of a silk blouse that probably cost more than a month's rent. I'm just managing the household. Why do I need all this? Mrs. Petrov's thin lips pressed together. Mr. Volkov entertains important people, business associates, political figures, celebrities. As his household manager, you represent him. Your appearance matters. She checked her watch. Lunch is at 1 in the staff dining room. I'll send someone to escort you. After that, I'll give you a tour of the property. With that, she left, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I sank onto the edge of the bed, running my hands over the plush duvet. What had I gotten myself into? I unpacked my meager belongings, hanging my clothes in a corner of the massive closet where they looked shabby and out of place next to the designer labels. In the bathroom, I found toiletries arranged in neat rows. Expensive brands I'd only seen in magazines. Everything spoke of wealth, of a world so far removed from my own that it might as well have been another planet. At 1 o'clock precisely, a knock came at my door. A young woman stood there, perhaps a few years younger than me, with honey blonde hair and a friendly smile. Hi, I'm Lily, she said, extending her hand. Mrs. Petrov sent me to show you to lunch. I shook her hand, relieved to see a friendly face. Sophia, thanks for coming to get me. This place is like a maze. You'll get used to it, she said, as we walked down a wide corridor lined with artwork I suspected might be original masterpieces. I've been here 6 months, and I only got lost twice last week. She laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I found myself smiling in response. What do you do here? I asked. I'm one of the housekeepers, she replied. I mainly handle the guest wing and help with events. You're the new household manager, right? Everyone's talking about you. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. What are they saying? Lily glanced at me sideways. Just that it's unusual for Mr. Volkov to hire someone with no experience for such an important position. Usually Mrs. Petrov handles everything. I don't think she's happy about me being here, I admitted. Mrs. Petrov isn't happy about anything, Lily whispered conspiratorially as we descended a grand staircase. But she's been here forever and runs everything like clockwork. Learn from her and you'll be fine. We reached the staff dining room, a surprisingly comfortable space with a long oak table and walls painted a warm yellow. Several staff members were already seated, conversation dying as we entered. Everyone, this is Sophia, the new household manager, Lily announced, guiding me to an empty chair. Nods and murmured greetings followed, some genuinely welcoming, others coolly polite. I recognized the chef from earlier, a middle-aged man with laugh lines around his eyes who introduced himself as Anton. Welcome to the madhouse, he said with a wink. Don't let this lot intimidate you. They're all bark, no bite. Lunch was a simple but delicious affair. Roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, and crusty bread that Anton proudly announced he had baked that morning. The conversation flowed around me, staff discussing preparations for the evening's dinner party. I listened carefully, trying to absorb as much as possible. 8 guests, said a stern-looking woman I learned was the head housekeeper. Mr. Sullivan from the investment firm, Senator and Mrs. Wilson, the Italian ambassador and his wife, Mr. Chen from the tech company, and the Romanovs. "The Romanovs are coming?" Lily asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Both of them?" The head housekeeper nodded grimly. Mr. Volkov specifically requested the blue guest room be prepared for them. Something in their exchange suggested these particular guests were significant, but before I could ask, Mrs. Petrov entered the room, and all conversation ceased immediately. "Sophia, it's time for your tour," she announced. "The rest of you should be at your stations. Guests arrive in less than 6 hours." I followed Mrs. Petrov through the mansion, trying to commit the layout to memory as she pointed out rooms, explained protocols, and rattled off a dizzying array of duties I would eventually be responsible for. The scale of the operation was overwhelming. The main house alone had 22 rooms, including a formal dining room that could seat 30, a ballroom, a library filled with rare books, and Volkov's private wing, which was strictly off-limits. "Mr. Volkov values his privacy above all else," Mrs. Petrov said sharply when I asked about the wing. "You will never enter unless specifically invited." By the time we finished the tour, my head was spinning with information. Mrs. Petrov led me to a small office adjacent to the kitchen, where a computer and stacks of binders awaited. These contain everything you need to know: staff schedules, vendor contacts, guest preferences, security protocols. She tapped the tallest stack. "Memorize them." I stared at the mountain of information in dismay. "All of this?" Her thin smile held no warmth. "Mr. Volkov has inexplicably placed his trust in you, Ms. Reyes. I suggest you don't disappoint him." She checked her watch again. "Daniel is waiting for your fitting. After that, you'll observe tonight's dinner service with me." Daniel turned out to be a rail-thin man, with impeccable taste and nimble fingers that pinned and adjusted clothing with lightning speed. He tutted over me like a disappointed parent. "Such potential, wasted on poor posture," he muttered, circling me as I stood awkwardly in a midnight blue sheath dress. "Shoulders back, chin up. You're representing Alexander Volkov now." After an hour of fittings and impromptu posture lessons, I was released to my suite to prepare for the evening. I showered and dressed in the blue dress Daniel had selected, paired with modest heels that I could actually walk in. The woman who looked back at me from the mirror was a stranger, polished, elegant, a far cry from the hotel maid of just days ago. At precisely 6 o'clock, Mrs. Petrov knocked on my door, giving me a critical once-over before nodding curtly. "Acceptable. Come, the staff is assembling for final instructions." Downstairs, the transformation was complete. The already immaculate house now gleamed with additional polish. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, and staff dressed in formal uniforms stood at attention. Mrs. Petrov ran through the evening's timeline with military precision, assigning tasks and emphasizing the importance of discretion. "Remember, what you see and hear tonight stays within these walls," she concluded, her gaze lingering on me. "Mr. Volkov's guests value their privacy as much as he values his." At 6:45, Alexander Volkov emerged from his private wing, and my breath caught in my throat. He'd been imposing in a business suit, but in formal evening wear, a perfectly tailored tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. He was devastating. His dark hair was slicked back, accentuating the sharp angles of his face, and his eyes, when they found mine across the foyer, seemed to burn with some unnamed intensity. He crossed to where I stood slightly apart from the other staff, Mrs. Petrov hovering nearby. "Sophia," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through me. "The dress suits you." "Thank you, Mr. Volkov," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Daniel has excellent taste." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might almost be a smile. "Indeed. Tonight you'll observe. Tomorrow you'll participate. Pay attention to the Romanovs in particular. They're important business partners." Before I could ask what kind of business, the sound of vehicles on the gravel driveway signaled the arrival of the first guests. Volkov moved to the entrance, and I took my place beside Mrs. Petrov, trying to ignore the speculative glances from the other staff. What followed was a masterclass in power, politics, and the subtle art of influence. I watched as Volkov greeted each guest with perfectly calibrated warmth, effusive with the senator, respectful with the ambassador, coolly professional with the businessman. But it was his interaction with the Romanovs that caught my attention. Dmitry Romanov was older than I expected, perhaps in his 60s, with steel-gray hair and a face that might have been handsome before time, and what looked like hard living had carved deep lines into it. His wife Irina was decades younger, closer to my age than his, with the kind of cold beauty that belonged on magazine covers. The moment they entered, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Volkov's greeting was formal, almost stiff, though his words were welcoming enough. Dmitry's response was equally reserved, while Irina's eyes swept the room with calculated disinterest until they landed on me. Her perfect eyebrows rose slightly, and she whispered something to her husband that made him glance in my direction. Throughout dinner, which I observed from the periphery under Mrs. Petrov's watchful eye, I noticed the tension between Volkov and the Romanovs. It wasn't overt, nothing so crass as raised voices or pointed remarks, but it was there in the careful way they spoke to each other, in the way Volkov's jaw tightened whenever Dmitry spoke, in the lingering looks Irina cast in Volkov's direction when her husband's attention was elsewhere. "Political allies?" I whispered to Mrs. Petrov as we watched the dinner service from the doorway. Her expression remained impassive. "Complicated," she replied, which told me nothing and everything at once. After dinner, the party moved to the library for drinks. I followed at a discreet distance, maintaining the careful invisibility of good service while absorbing everything. The conversation flowed from business to politics to art, Volkov steering topics with subtle skill. I began to understand why he needed someone like me, someone who could observe, remember, and recognize the undercurrents that ran beneath the polite conversation. As the evening wore on, I noticed Dmitry Romanov becoming increasingly inebriated, his voice growing louder, his gestures more expansive. Irina watched him with thinly veiled disgust, while Volkov remained perfectly composed, though I caught the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested his patience was wearing thin. Shortly after midnight, Volkov caught my eye and tilted his head slightly toward the door, a silent command to follow. I slipped away from Mrs. Petrov and met him in the hallway. "The Romanovs will stay the night," he said, without preamble. "Dmitry is in no condition to travel. Make sure their suite is prepared, and arrange for a car tomorrow afternoon." I nodded, mentally reviewing what I'd learned about the blue guest room. "Is there anything specific they require?" Volkov's expression was unreadable. "Irina prefers orchids. White. Make sure there are fresh ones in their room." He hesitated, then added, "And Sophia, have Mikhail stationed in the hallway outside their suite tonight, as a precaution." "A precaution against what?" I asked before I could stop myself. His eyes met mine, dark and suddenly cold. "Curiosity can be dangerous in this household, Sophia. Remember that." He returned to his guests, leaving me with more questions than answers, and the distinct impression that I had just been warned away from a truth I wasn't ready to face. The next morning dawned gray and misty, rain pattering against my windows like nervous fingers. I'd slept fitfully, dreams filled with cold-eyed women and cryptic warnings. At precisely 6, a soft knock announced the arrival of my wake-up call, a maid bearing a silver tray with coffee and a note written in a bold, slashing hand. "Breakfast in my study, 7 a.m., AV." I dressed carefully in one of the outfits Daniel had selected, a charcoal pencil skirt and cream silk blouse that felt like wearing liquid against my skin. As I made my way through the quiet mansion, I noticed Mikhail standing outside the blue guest room, his posture alert despite having been there all night. He nodded once as I passed, a gesture that felt almost like respect. Volkov's study was located at the far end of his private wing, a space I'd been expressly forbidden to enter without invitation. I hesitated at the threshold, suddenly aware that crossing it would represent another boundary blurred, another step deeper into whatever web Alexander Volkov was weaving around me. I knocked softly. "Enter," came his voice from within. The study was everything I expected and nothing I imagined. Walls lined with books in multiple languages, a massive desk of polished walnut, windows overlooking the mist-shrouded gardens. What surprised me was its warmth, the lived-in feeling of a space that was actually used rather than merely showcased. Volkov sat behind the desk, already immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit despite the early hour. He motioned to a chair across from him where a breakfast spread waited, Pastries, fruit, more coffee. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, closing the laptop before him. "Well enough," I replied, taking the seat he indicated. "The Romanovs?" "Still asleep." He studied me over the rim of his coffee cup. "What did you observe last night, Sophia?" I hesitated, selecting a strawberry to buy time. The guests seemed to be a mix of business and political connections. "The senator is clearly hoping for your support, financial or otherwise. Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Chen appeared to be discussing some kind of merger or acquisition." Volkov nodded, his expression giving nothing away. "And the Romanovs?" I met his gaze steadily. "There's history there. Not entirely pleasant. Dmitri resents you for something, while his wife—" I trailed off, unsure how to delicately phrase my observation. "While his wife?" Volkov prompted, a dangerous edge to his voice. "Seems to have personal interest in you," I finished, "one I suspect her husband is aware of and doesn't appreciate." Volkov's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Approval, perhaps. "Very good. What else?" "You're cultivating political influence, building a coalition of some kind. The dinner wasn't just social, it was strategic." I took a sip of coffee, finding courage in the bitter warmth. "What I don't understand is why you need me to see it." He leaned back in his chair, regarding me thoughtfully. "People underestimate the value of careful observation, Sophia. The ability to read a room, to see beneath the surface of polite conversation. It's a rare skill." He gestured to the mansion around us. "I have staff to clean, to cook, to manage schedules. What I need is someone who sees what I see. Someone loyal." "To help you with your business," I said carefully. His smile was sharp. "My business is complicated." "Illegal?" The word hung between us, dangerous and electric. "Not everything I do falls neatly into categories of legal and illegal." He rose, moving to the window with predatory grace. "The world isn't black and white, Sophia. There are shades of gray where the real power lies." I set down my coffee cup. "Why me?" I asked, for what felt like the 100th time. "You have all this. Power, influence, wealth. Why pull a hotel maid into your world?" He turned to face me, backlit by the misty morning light. "Because you walked into my suite when no one else would have dared. Because you stood your ground when most would have crumbled. Because despite everything life has thrown at you, your mother's death, your father's illness, the dreams you abandoned, you've survived. Adapted." His eyes locked with mine. "People like us recognize each other, Sophia." Before I could respond, a sharp knock came at the door, and Mikhail entered without waiting for permission. A breach of protocol that immediately set my nerves on edge. "They're gone," he said without preamble. Volkov's expression hardened. "What do you mean, gone?" "The Romanovs. Left before dawn. Took something from your office." Volkov moved with startling speed, crossing to a painting on the far wall. He swung it aside, revealing a small safe. His fingers flew over the keypad, and the door swung open. Whatever he expected to find was missing, judging by the curse that escaped him. A harsh sound in a language I didn't understand but recognized as profoundly vulgar. "The flash drive," he said, voice dangerously soft. "Find them. Now." Mikhail nodded once and left, already pulling a phone from his pocket. Volkov turned to me, his face transformed by cold fury. "It seems your observation about the Romanovs was more accurate than you knew." Dmitri's drunkenness was an act, a distraction while his wife did the real work. "What was on the drive?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Information. The kind that could destroy people, powerful people who pay very well for my discretion." His eyes narrowed. "This is your first test, Sophia. What happens next will determine your future in this household." My heart raced. "What do you want me to do? Tell me everything you noticed about Irina Romanov last night. Every detail, no matter how small." I closed my eyes, calling up the mental image of the cold-eyed beauty. Designer dress. Valentino, I think. Recent collection. She wore minimal jewelry except for a large diamond ring and a thin gold chain around her neck. I opened my eyes. The chain had something attached to it. A pendant or charm that she kept touching whenever she spoke to you. Volkov nodded, encouraging me to continue. She drank sparingly, 1 glass of wine with dinner, a half glass of brandy after. She excused herself twice during the evening. Once before dessert, once during drinks in the library. I frowned, remembering. The second time, she was gone longer. 15 minutes, maybe 20. Where did she go? Volkov pressed. I assumed the restroom, but I hesitated. Mrs. Petrov sent me to check on the kitchen at that point. I wasn't watching. Volkov paced the study, energy radiating from him like heat. She knows the layout of this house. She's been here before, many times. He glanced at me sharply. Years ago, Irina and I were involved before her marriage to Dmitri. She knows my habits, my security protocols. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me. Yet I felt an unexpected twist of something that felt dangerously like jealousy. I pushed it aside. Your office. Would she know how to access it? Possibly. He moved to his desk, pressed a button underneath. A panel in the bookshelf slid aside, revealing monitors displaying security feeds from throughout the property. Let's find out. For the next hour, we reviewed footage from the previous night, tracking Irina's movements through the mansion. Her second absence from the library was telling. She hadn't gone to the restroom but had slipped upstairs, moving with practiced ease through corridors and past security measures. There, Volkov said, pointing to a feed showing Irina emerging from a room I recognized as his private office. 4:37 a.m. Dmitri created a disturbance in their suite to distract Mikhail while she retrieved whatever she had hidden there earlier. His phone rang, and he answered with a terse, "Report." I watched his expression shift as he listened, cold calculation replacing anger. Understood. Proceed as planned. He ended the call, turning to me. They've been located. A private airfield 30 miles north. The plane is being delayed with mechanical issues while my people move into position. A chill ran down my spine. What will happen to them? Volkov's expression was unreadable. That depends on what you think should happen, Sophia. I blinked, caught off guard. Me? Why would my opinion matter? Because I'm curious about your moral compass. He moved closer, his proximity making it hard to think clearly. Dmitri Romanov is not an innocent man. He's responsible for trafficking operations across 3 countries, laundering money through charities meant to help children. Irina is his willing accomplice. They've stolen information that, in the wrong hands, could compromise people who trust me to protect them. His eyes locked with mine. What would you have me do? I swallowed hard. Is this what you do? Collect secrets and sell protection? Information is power, he said simply. I provide security to those who need it. Leverage against those who deserve it. The world runs on secrets, Sophia. I merely ensure they flow in the right direction. And the Romanovs are attempting to blackmail me, to force my cooperation in their more unsavory ventures. I took a deep breath. There must be a way to retrieve what they stole without bloodshed. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. Compassion, even for enemies. Interesting. He returned to his desk, pressed another button on his phone. Mikhail, change of plans. Retrieval only, no permanent solutions. Relief washed over me, though I wasn't entirely sure why. These people were criminals, Volkov included. I had no illusions about that, and yet the thought of having their deaths on my conscience was unbearable. Thank you, I said quietly. Volkov studied me, head tilted slightly. Don't thank me yet, Sophia. The day is young, and your real test is just beginning. Over the next few hours, I witnessed firsthand the scope of Volkov's operation. His estate wasn't merely a home, but the nerve center of a vast network. Staff I had assumed were merely household employees revealed themselves as operatives with specialized skills. Lily, the friendly housekeeper, turned out to be a computer expert who could hack into any system. Anton, the jovial chef, was an ex-military strategist who coordinated field teams with terrifying efficiency. And at the center of it all was Alexander Volkov, orchestrating every move with the precision of a chess master. I watched him work, issuing commands, analyzing information as it came in, 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. It was terrifying and, God help me, fascinating. By mid-afternoon, word came that the flash drive had been recovered. The Romanovs had been allowed to leave, shaken but unharmed, with a clear understanding that any further attempts would be met with less mercy. They'll go to ground for a while, Volkov said as the room cleared, leaving us alone again. When they resurface, it will be with a different approach. I sank into a chair, emotionally and physically exhausted. Is this what my job will be, helping you manage this? He approached slowly, coming to stand before me. This is who I am, Sophia, what I do. The question is whether you can accept it, accept me as I am. I looked up at him, this dangerous man who had pulled me into his world. Why does it matter what I think? You could have anyone. Not anyone, he said softly. Someone loyal, someone intelligent, someone who sees me clearly and doesn't flinch. His hand reached out, fingers brushing my cheek with surprising gentleness. Someone like you. The touch sent electricity through me, a current of awareness that had been building since that first moment in the hotel suite. I should have been repulsed, should have recoiled from this man and everything he represented. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, drawn to the darkness and light that seemed to war within him. I don't know if I can be what you need, I whispered. His smile was soft, genuine in a way I hadn't seen before. You already are, he said. The question is whether I can be what you deserve. In that moment, looking up at Alexander Volkov, I realized I had crossed a line from which there was no return. I had glimpsed his world, the power, the danger, the complex morality that governed it, and some part of me wanted to understand it better, to understand him. I'm staying, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke it, not because I have no choice, but because I choose to. But I have conditions. His eyebrow raised slightly. More conditions? My father's care continues, regardless of what happens between us. You never ask me to compromise my core values. And you tell me the truth, always, even when it's ugly. He considered this, then nodded once. Accepted. And in return? Loyalty, I said simply. For as long as you earn it. Alexander extended his hand to me, and I took it, allowing him to pull me to my feet. We stood face to face, a new understanding between us, not quite trust, not yet, but the foundation for it. Whatever came next, whatever this dangerous dance between us became, I would face it with open eyes. Welcome to my world, Sophia Reyes, he said softly. And despite everything, despite the danger and the moral ambiguity and the uncertain future that stretched before us, I smiled. For the first time in years, I felt fully alive, standing at the edge of something both terrifying and exhilarating. Thank you, Alexander, I replied, using his first name deliberately, claiming this small power for myself. I think I might belong here after all.